So once again, my dear friends, we're talking about the Acolyte episode 8. We have some major reveals from Leslye Headland, who spoke about Darth Plagueis, the truth about Plagueis, but I want to begin with one of the most significant moments of the episode. We spoke about Osha bleeding Soul's kyber crystal, but what about that Force choke? There is a question going round. Was the Acolyte just an elaborate Force choke origin story? Was the whole trope of killing a Jedi without a weapon leading to this? Well, honestly, no. Because according to Disney's own Star Wars canon, the use of Force choke much earlier in the timeline is documented in other High Republic stories, but definitely not in the same context, many of them taking place 100 years before the events of the Acolyte. It even exists in the Old Republic. I know that's no longer canon, but make no mistake, this is not the first time in the new canon timeline this would be seen. Now, do we know if this was Leslye Headland's intention? Well, honestly not. In all of the interviews she's given, she hasn't spoken about it, at least at the time of the making of this video. Force choke, also known as Force grip, is synonymous not just with the Sith and the dark side, but more specifically Darth Vader. He was the first character on screen to ever use it in 1977's A New Hope. Luke uses it when he enters Jabba's palace at the start of episode 6. At the start of Return of the Jedi following The Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas and Richard Marquand insisted there be some dark parallels between Luke and his father, almost foreshadowing a path Luke could eventually go down. But at the end of the movie, when he throws his lightsaber down and says, "I am a Jedi like my father before me," he's rejecting that possible path. So there's the Force choke, but it's also why you see him wearing black robes. Beautiful poetry and visual symbolism. The Force choke was usually associated with the dark side. The power was generally used at close range, but in rare instances, the target could be choked at greater distance, if for example they were communicating through a view screen as we see in The Empire Strikes Back. But as I said, there are instances of Jedi using it. Ahsoka Tano, Grogu, even Dooku when he was a Jedi. Some who used the ability demonstrated being able to lift their victim off the ground. When it was first introduced in A New Hope, fans loved it. It was a demonstration of pure evil being able to control the breathing of a victim, especially dark side users and Sith, such as Vader with a short fuse. They would use it in instances of being irritated. Just think of what he does to Krennic in Rogue One. In Star Wars Legends, it was a bit different. Force choke was a variation of Force telekinesis, and it was a bit more violent. Used to grip or squeeze a living being's throat, Force grip in the expanded universe was considered one of the most offensive means of attack, and we see numerous instances of the Force wielder snapping or breaking a victim's throat or vertebrae, applying so much pressure the victim is in agony. Now this is where I feel like the Acolyte could do something very interesting. If, and it's a big if, it's renewed for a season 2, we could see some Force abilities used by Sith, such as using the Force to telekinetically destroy the victim's organs. In Jedi Quest, The Final Showdown, Count Dooku did this on Korriban, using the Force to kill a black market dealer, Oban, crushing her heart, killing her in seconds. Darth Bane did this on his own father. All I'm saying is I wish we got to see more lore surrounding the Sith, more of their horrifying Force abilities. Did you notice in the scene where Qimir touches the helmet that Osha is wearing, his eyes went black? This confused a lot of fans, because while it was similar to witch possession like what happened to Torbin and Kelnaka, for a minute there I thought Qimir was about to transform into some kind of monster, but he wasn't. It was evoking, invading his mind, the same way the witches did. And as Leslye Headland says, the separation of mind and body, which is why you had two versions of Qimir in that moment, inside his mind, and the physical manifestation of him being possessed with the massive, terrifying black eyes. Now, did you know in a brand new interview Leslye Headland has addressed the future of these Sith? She spoke about Plagueis, Osha, and the Stranger. And here's the thing, my dear friends, Force abilities aside, if we get a season 2, she makes it very clear that Plagueis is the one who comes out triumphant. He has to survive, because eventually he finds young Palpatine. And she describes the story of Osha and Qimir as tragic. Eventually, whatever happens, they're the two who have to die. For fans of Star Wars Legends, this comes as great news. She said, quote, "Even though Osha and the Stranger are standing there looking out at the sunset, ready to conquer the world together, the tragedy is that we know they don't. We know there can only be two, and we now know Plagueis is there. We know these two are doomed in some kind of way, so to me it's a bittersweet tragedy, a foreboding ending because I know about the Sith lineage, whereas I think a different subset of the audience can be like, they're married. So she does confirm a couple of things: the romantic love interest, that Plagueis is the big bad, and not just a rival apprentice as some fans theorized. They're not introducing Tenebrous, so Plagueis is the big bad, and by the sounds of things, if we do get a season 2, he's gotta come out victorious. They don't seem to want to change that. But in her interview with IndieWire, she says, it's gonna take more Star Wars stories in this period for us to learn the extent Osha and the Stranger influence, mitigate, and contribute to Plagueis' rise. But the reason they infused him for a very short cameo was to, quote, infuse the finale with a graceful horror and make it evident, even at a glance, this guy is a monster who wants certain things. But the biggest difference between Legends Plagueis by James Luceno and Canon Plagueis by Leslye Headland is the fact in canon he doesn't seem to be involved in politics, business, or financial corporations. At least not just yet. He's not Higo Damask. Leslye implies a more feral, primitive side. So don't expect the same kind of character if he does return. He doesn't have a public-facing persona, he's not well-spoken. All of this could be added, but she said this: the Sith here are different. This is not the First Order, this is not the Empire, this is not Chancellor of the Senate. The Sith are hiding out. They're fighting for their survival and their lives. And so, when you're fighting for survival, there is no such thing as a fair fight. It will be interesting if they do expand Plagueis in a further season or a book, or another piece of canon Star Wars media. But while Plagueis looked the same, I believe their depictions are going to be fundamentally different. So for those who believe we're getting a Darth Plagueis live-action adaptation, I strongly believe we have to temper our expectations. That doesn't seem like the direction they're going. She further reveals the cameo was originally going to be at the end, where the Yoda cameo takes place, but she didn't want to end the season on such a sinister note. I should also point out, Leslye is very set on Osha not being redeemed. She tried it the way of the Jedi, she said. We know that. And while the Stranger was a fighter and a terrifying villain, there is this other side, the dark side. She notes, he has this other seductive, intentionally vulnerable, probing of her own strength in the Force type of side, pushing her to tap into emotions she's been suppressing. So, by the sounds of things, this is gonna end in tragedy for them. But if season 2 happens, we need to see more Plagueis, we need to learn more about the Sith. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts on all of today's speculation and news in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and why not check out our Patreon, the link is down below. But until the next one, my dear friends, may the Force be with you, always.